Another Russian ally is under heavy pressure. Almost a week ago, Tuareg rebels of the FLA and Islamists of the JNIM launched a surprise offensive against government troops who are supported by the Russian Africa Corps in Mali. The Tuareg rebels are currently continuing to consolidate their control over northern Mali, while government troops and the Russian Africa Corps have abandoned large parts of the area. Meanwhile, the Islamists of the JNIM are carrying out a blockade of the capital Bamako, and the Islamic State Sahel province is also trying to use the chaos to expand its control. This video explains what's happening there and the prospects. The rebels have now confirmed that they have captured Tessalit. That's here in the north, on the border with Algeria. So they are continuing to consolidate their control in the north. Also, the town of Interhak has been taken. That is west of the river and west of Gao, one of the important cities attacked at the beginning. Here at this location as well, the opposition is now under control. It's the same with Tessit, which is further south, west of the river, here towards the state of Niger, and a withdrawal of troops also took place at the border with Niger from Labasanga. However, it was not negotiated there, and according to reports, the convoy was attacked by the Islamic State during the withdrawal. The Islamic State itself has moved into Labasanga and has now apparently taken control of the city, Menaka as well. At first, it was apparently taken over by Islamic State fighters, according to the report. They captured it, but on the 28th, they were apparently driven out of the city again. That means government control is said to still exist within Menaka. According to the reports, Gurmararus is also said to have fallen, and here we see it is now moving towards Timbuktu along the river heading west. Previously, Berg had already fallen, and we see it is to the west of that. We talked about this in the last one. In the video about Mali, we talked about how the offensive was obviously strategically well planned in order to cut off retreat routes and lines of communication, leaving towns without supplies and thus being able to control them in this way. The capture of Ombon was also reported here at this location. This is in the south. That means it continues here towards the west. However, the military base itself apparently did not fall there. So here we have a video where the Russians said that they have recently flown in supplies there by air, by helicopter, and have evacuated the wounded. I haven't seen any geolocation of it, so I looked it up myself, and we can clearly see the container and the paved airstrip here, and it's actually down here. We can even see the container here. The helicopter is almost exactly at this spot. That's southwest of Ombon, but it shows us that at least at this location, government troops are still active. That's at least the latest status at this point. FLA, the Tuareg rebels, the Front de Libération d'Assawa, say that Timbuktu is the next target. So they are stating that it's clearly moving westward. And that was the latest status on April 29th. I haven't found a more recent map. So here in the south, we see the Islamic State Sahel province is active and trying to expand its control. It failed in Minarka, but here at the border with Niger, it was active. Apparently, it was successful, and the FLA is advancing toward Timbuktu, while the JNIM is pushing back government troops in the area southwest of there. On April 28, the JNIM declared the siege of Bamako. Here in the south, they are blocking the roads there. There are already numerous pictures and videos of long vehicle convoys standing still because no vehicles are being allowed through anymore. Radio France reports that people are not being attacked, but nothing is allowed to go towards Bamako. No vehicles, no goods, not even motorcycles, but interestingly, vehicles from Bamako are still allowed through. However, nothing is allowed to go towards the capital anymore. They obviously want to depopulate the capital to some extent. Reba, however, claims that this is not true. We have footage here and also videos showing trucks carrying fuel. It's unclear when they were taken. This one has actually been geolocated at this spot, and it's here. It should be here. That's the hut. And if we go outside, it's actually the road from the south heading toward Bamako. To what extent that means the area is now cut off, and how complete the blockade is, can't be said at this point. But it's clear that most of the fuel comes from the Ivory Coast and from the west here, from Guinea. So if one of the roads is open, that might prevent a complete collapse. But of course, the situation in Bamako will still get worse by the hour. So people in Bamako are cut off. But you don't have to be, of course. Because with today's sponsor, you can at least bypass blockades on the internet, simply by changing your country with one click. If only it were that easy in Mali. For work, I often have to access sites with geo-blocking. That's when I need a VPN. I've been using CyberGhost for 4 years now. CyberGhost VPN is one of the world's leading VPN providers. With more than 38 million users, the VPN hides the IP address, encrypts the data, and routes all internet traffic through a secure VPN tunnel. The VPN also allows access to over 40 popular streaming providers like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and BBC iPlayer. This gives you worldwide access without geo-blocking. Servers in 100 countries are available for business and personal use. The software available for Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, Smart TV, game consoles, and Linux is user-friendly and easy to use, even without technical knowledge. If any problems do occur, support is available around the clock, of course also in German. Thousands of 5-star reviews on Trustpilot speak for themselves, as do over 38 million users. With one subscription, you can register up to 7 different devices at the same time. The login details may expressly be shared with your own family. By clicking on the link below, you will receive an 83% discount, and then you will get an additional 4 months for free. CyberGhost offers a 45-day money-back guarantee, so you take absolutely no risk. So what is the current state of the fighting? If we want to look at it that way, we see that the FLA is visibly trying to consolidate the war zone it claims. The attack on Sivar on the 25th fits into this. That attack apparently failed. It was supposed to target air support, or rather to eliminate it. Sivare is here in the south, a bit south of the Timbuktu line. But what we see here, for example at the airfield in the footage, at least at that time, this should be a Mi-24 Hind, that one too, and that one as well. And that's probably a Mi-8 or Mi-17, so transport and attack helicopters at this location, which would of course have been taken out in the event of a successful attack there. At the same time, the rebels are clearly trying to destroy the logistics and the supply routes. In the south, the RN-17 route to Niger has been cut off. We can see this by the fall of the villages along this area. To the north, with the attacks on the RN-18, the connection to the north has been cut off as well, in order to disrupt the supply of the Malian government troops in that direction too. The attacks are ongoing. Those are along the RN-18 heading west. We saw this here in Omare, and progress is also being made on the RN-33 towards Timbuktu. That means they clearly want to advance here in the west. By the way, this is the area claimed by the Tuareg. Kidal, Gao, and Timbuktu are the 3 provinces they once proclaimed as their state. We can see this in the fighting here. The fighting is also taking place further south. But it's not just the FLA carrying out attacks. JNIM is also involved. FPV drones were also used in the process. Of course, that's something that shouldn't surprise us anymore. We also see that the pilots there seem to be a bit more experienced than, for example, the Hezbollah pilots were in the early days. We can clearly see much more control over the drones here than in other cases. So there were a number of FPV attacks here. At the same time, the rebels have obviously captured at least one Mi-24. I'm not sure what condition it's in. It looks like the tail is missing somehow. That means it's not entirely clear whether this is recent damage or if it's been like this for a while. However, the rust would suggest that it's been sitting at this airfield for quite some time, so probably not airworthy. However, a BTR-82 was also captured, a BTR-82 AT. However, that one might still be operational.
Funktionsfähig sein.
And the rebels have also captured several Russian MRAPs. That means, in terms of equipment as well, the rebels' situation has improved. There are also recordings of ammunition depots where, among other things, rockets were captured. The regime itself lost Defense Minister Sadio Kamara, who held the rank of Lieutenant General right at the beginning. Here we see where the attack on him took place. It was apparently a So, an improvised explosion that was on a vehicle. And we see the destruction in the surrounding area. It was obviously big, really professionally planned, and carried out with great effort to eliminate him in this way, which of course makes it more difficult to respond to the attack when the defense minister has been eliminated in this way. He was considered, and that's what Jean-Afrique writes here, as a man from Monaco, as Moscow's man in Mali. In this respect, this could worsen relations with Russia in the medium term. Weaknesses in this regard: if he is the man who was most closely connected to Russia and has now been removed from the junta, he was one of the 5 leading officers who carried out the coup. And also because of the withdrawal, Radio France writes here that there are already accusations that the Russians have betrayed Mali because they had withdrawn from the north with hardly any significant resistance. And at first, it was even said that the Malian government troops had been left alone. Jean-Afrique also writes that cracks are now forming within the junta. There are reports that factions within the military want to replace Assimi Goïta with another general. This is the one here. Goïta was also attacked, but he was not injured. Unlike the intelligence chief, he is said to have been wounded and is out of action. Goïta apparently got away. But now it seems that part of the military is trying to replace him because he has obviously failed significantly. The FLA writes and says the regime will fall. That means the FLA now obviously wants to do much more than just establish Azawad, as was the case 10 years ago. Now they want to go after the regime itself. However, it's the case that Jainim is mainly made up of Salafists from the country's ethnic minorities and is based on them. The country itself, especially the cities, is dominated by the Bambara. Jainim may put pressure on the government. Realistically, however, they would hardly be able to control southern Mali. The area is too large and, above all, too densely populated. The most generous estimates at this point are that there are actually 4 million people in the capital, Bamako, alone. Realistically, Jainim can hardly control that many inhabitants. That means what it will aim for is to influence the regime. It probably can't achieve much more than that. And in the past, Jainim has already demanded and conducted negotiations with the junta. The fact that they were able to reach an agreement with the actually secular FLA also indicates a certain willingness to compromise. In the past, Jainim has demanded and conducted negotiations. Also, the fact that they were able to reach an agreement with the secular FLA indicates a certain willingness to compromise. Actually, the secular FLA showed a willingness to compromise. However, ISSP, that is, the Islamic State Sahel province, has become active.
Russlands in Straucheln geraten.
The fact that they were able to reach an agreement with the secular group shows a certain willingness to compromise. And in the past, negotiations have already been demanded and conducted by Jainim. That seems very unlikely. It is therefore questionable when the government troops, even with Russian help, will ever want to return to the north. Russia is helping, so they have not withdrawn, even though the rebels had basically given the Russians this option, because Russia very quickly switched sides in Syria and immediately started negotiating with HTS when Assad started to falter, in order to maintain its influence in the country. Russia has shown in Syria that having influence in the country matters more to them than supporting any specific government, despite long-term alliances. And that was probably at least partly the hope of the rebels here as well. Russia is helping now, but how much reinforcement can it realistically send? How many attack helicopters does it have left? How many transport helicopters? How many soldiers can it send? That means there probably isn't much to be expected there. The tensions within the regime itself can only weaken it. On top of that, there is now at least a partial blockade of Bamako, which will noticeably weaken and worsen the situation in the capital. And of course, this will increase the pressure on the regime itself. Jainim will probably try to negotiate something with the regime that brings it closer to its goals, such as Sharia law. FLA wants its own state, while JNIM demonstrates strong state governance and strategic planning. We see this both in the attacks, for example, that airports were specifically targeted to eliminate air support, and that strategically important cities were deliberately targeted to cut off supply lines. But while Jainim, for example, has kidnapped Emiratis, Russians, Turks, and Indians, they have held back from kidnapping Westerners. probably to avoid provoking an intervention. The direct takeover. So, should JNIM somehow be able to hold back the government, actually overthrowing it and establishing themselves in the presidential palace in Bamako would most likely lead to chaos. The population would probably be too hostile for that. And at the same time, JNIM has too few fighters to control that at all. And at the same time, that could also lead to an ECOWAS military intervention, meaning from the states that are allied with Nigeria. The alliance that practically stretches along the Gulf of Guinea could lead to a military intervention. What about Western involvement? The direct JNIM
nichts gewinnen. JNIM werden also vermutlich
be able to try to find some solution there that brings them closer to their goal, but without causing complete chaos at the same time. Maybe by overthrowing the government and getting involved themselves. We'll have to wait and see. It can also be expected that JNIM and FLA will soon clash with ISSP, the Islamic State Sahel province. Of course, because they are currently trying to use the distraction of the other parties to expand their own territory. So, a solution to the crisis is still nowhere in sight. The pressure on the regime has increased drastically, and it's on the ropes. Of course, we'll continue to follow how things develop here on the channel. Once again, thanks to today's video sponsor, CyberGhost VPN. If you subscribe using the link below, you'll get an 83% discount and an additional 4 months for free, while you also have a 45-day money-back guarantee at the start. If you don't want to miss anything, give the channel a thumbs up. That helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment if you have something to add. And if you're new here, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. German time, there will be a new situation report on the Ukraine war and the situation in the Persian Gulf. 8 p.m. German time, followed by a Q&A session where we can of course also discuss this topic here. That's all from my side for now. Thank you for your attention and see you soon. At this point, my special thanks also go to Uwe de Vren, nicknamed to BIP, Karsten Schultz, and Rom. You can take out a subscription using the link provided. Alex Rosenthal, Matt Best, Sickwriter 666, Muter 1000, Janice Gu
Eustress. Vielen herzlichen Dank. Ohne Sie
is being withheld.